So hello everyone, this is Michael Butterman with the Boulder Philharmonic, and I'm pleased to be joined today by mandolinist and composer and conductor Jeff Midkiff, who performed his mandolin concerto from the Blue Ridge with the Boulder Philharmonic actually a couple of times, if I'm not mistaken. We did it, I don't actually have the year in my mind as I'm speaking to you now, and then brought you back a year or so later, 2 years maybe, to perform the piece in Boulder, and then also in Washington, D.C. when we went to the Kennedy Center for the Shift Festival. And it is that performance from which we have an excerpt, a video excerpt of the end of the concerto, the end of the finale, the end of the last movement, as well as the encore that you played along with the orchestra at that performance. It was just such a thrill for the orchestra to be able to share that piece, and it works so beautifully with our theme, which was all about nature and music, how composers are inspired by the natural world. You called this piece From the Blue Ridge, which I know is kind of a play on From the New World, the symphony by Dvorak. Tell me a little bit about I guess, the natural world inspiration for the piece.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Sure.
So I live in Roanoke, Virginia. I was born and raised here in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia. I'm here right now in quarantine.
Right.
I could think of worse places to be. But I grew up learning to play the mandolin at an early age, listening to folk music and especially bluegrass music, and the physical world, as well as the sounds of the kind of music that we listen to, fiddle tunes, and it just was something that was part of my DNA growing up. So I knew lots of melodies, and when I started playing in bands and things like that, that became part of what I did, playing bluegrass music for a living. And then later on, I learned the wonderful world that's out there with the classical traditions, and I learned to play the clarinet. I got all my degrees in clarinet and teaching and conducting. And so I sort of, in the last 10, 15 years, started composing for that instrument, my favorite instrument there, the mandolin, to include that with the symphonic format. And so that's sort of how that works. When I premiered the work in here with the Roanoke Symphony, David Wiley, the conductor, asked me to write the piece, and he told me that it was going to be on the concert with the Dvorak New World Symphony. And it just made sense. From the Blue Ridge sort of worked itself in there. It's just part of who I am, the melodies that I used. And anyway, so that's sort of me trying to portray all of that symphonically.
Right. So you were channeling a little bit of the, let's say, folk music of that part of the country that you're familiar with, and that the mandolin is, with which the mandolin is associated, at least sometimes.
Right.
And then you had, well, I tell you what, let's just talk about the mandolin for a moment as a solo instrument. And mandolin in classical music goes back to the Baroque era, and probably before that, as far as I know. But certainly, I can think of Baroque composers who wrote for the mandolin. I know that Beethoven wrote a sonatina for mandolin, or maybe a couple of them. I don't know.
That's right.
I heard the other day. I was like, "That's really beautiful."
Right.
But I would gather that most people today associate mandolin with folk music traditions. Your experience as a mandolinist came out of playing mostly bluegrass music. Am I right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Growing up.
Yes, and so the approach that you took when writing this was to include some of that bluegrass feel, especially in the last movement, as I recall. But in the first couple of movements, the instrument does well. It just takes on I don't know, maybe a more classical sort of feel somehow, or just to me, it is not so much associated with folk music as it is just another instrument that is part of your texture that you're creating in those two movements. The second movement, very, very slow, or not very, very slow, but very, very beautiful and lyrical. Copland-esque. I think I've described it before, and I mean that as a great compliment.
Thank
Uh, so when you were writing this, as you mentioned, you studied clarinet and played in orchestras, and you conduct orchestras. Were you, well, I'm probably answering the question as I'm asking it, but I'm guessing you were drawing upon a little bit of everything that you have experienced as a musician, and putting that together in this piece. Do I have that right?
It's exactly right. I was not trying to have the orchestra play bluegrass music or vice versa. Not at all. I wanted to compose what I have in me. That's part of who I am, and that would be some of the melodies that probably go to that DNA where I remember when I was growing up. That happen to be folk melodies, but then again, I also have a lot of things that a lot of melodies and you know, Brahms and Mahler and Elgar and other parts that are just as a part of who I am as a composer.
Yeah, there is absolutely also some. I think I've also mentioned to me, I hear Mahler in certain moments in that second movement as well. Really, I really do. Some of Mahler's more intimate writing, I would say. So let's talk for a second about in this last movement, which is the clip that people are going to be able to see here. We have a drum set, which is unusual in an orchestra setting, but not at all unusual if you're talking about, let's say, folk music or bluegrass music, I suppose. And also the violin, solo violin concertmaster has an important role. So there's almost a little feel of a sort of a jam session that appears to be happening in that movement. Is that all written out, or is it sort of improvised, or how does that work?
It's all written out, but going back to it, when I was playing in a bluegrass band, it's all improvised. And composing, I feel, is improvisation on a large scale. You just write it down.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of how I approach things. And in the last movement of the concerto is indeed, I wanted sort of a controlled jam session. It's all written out, but I approach it from a improvisational approach.
Yeah, I think that certainly comes through. It feels spontaneous, even if it is, as you say, planned. Well, or at least
that was my intention.
Predetermined. Let's just say exactly. Let's talk for a second about the experience of going to Kennedy Center and playing there. I mean, for you, it not only was a chance to be seen as a composer on a important national stage, as well as a soloist, but more than that, you were able to bring some young people that you work with. Tell us about that.
Absolutely. I mean, it couldn't be any better. The Shift Festival with you and the Boulder Philharmonic and all of that created a situation where I could be showcased as a composer, as a mandolin soloist, and also a conductor and an educator. I teach at a large high school in Roanoke, Virginia, Patrick Henry High School, and we were able to bring our chamber orchestra and perform at the Millennium Stage the night before. And it's just really thrilling to be able to have those young people be able to share in all of that. So it was an incredible experience. And I still have yes, I still have the
bandana. Yes,
we got one of my prized possessions. But the kids had a great time, and we just have. It's great to be able to teach music and to be able to take them to the Kennedy Center as well. That was great.
Well, and how great. I was going to say how great for them to have been able to go there and say that they performed there, but also then to see their conductor, their teacher, be featured the way he was the next night. I mean, I'm sure they won't forget it.
Thrilling for a lot of people, that's for sure. So I got a lot of the kids that sort of, had looked at me a little funny when we got back, but I mean, in a good way.
I can understand.
So it was great.
Tell us just a little bit about this encore that is also on the video. That is a piece, a hornpipe. Oh, tell us a little bit about that.
It's a fiddle tune. Bill Monroe wrote this piece. It's called Monroe's Hornpipe. Bill Monroe was a mandolin player. He pretty much invented bluegrass music, a hero of mine. And that is an arrangement of his tune for mandolin and strings. And it's just a lot of fun.
It is a lot of fun. And it just goes faster and faster at the end, and and we hold on, and you just kind of blaze through it and bring the audience to their feet at the end, which was it was an exciting performance, and exciting to be able to do it with you. What else have you got on your plate in terms of composing? I know there is also a concerto that you have for mandolin and fiddle, basically.
Right. Mandolin and violin. There's a double concerto for mandolin and violin. I look forward to hopefully in the future be able to play that in my mandolin concerto. I have written, I've arranged the mandolin concerto for string quartet and mandolin for the Carpe Diem string quartet. And they had me, that went over so well, they had me compose a new piece. I call it my Gypsy Quintet, second mandolin quintet. And that was a thrill also to be able to perform that with the Carpe Diem String Quartet last January 2019 at Carnegie Hall.
Right.
So been very fortunate the last couple of years to play some of my music at some very cool places. Well, composing, now that we all are more practicing social distancing, I've got some ideas. I really hope to start doing some composing as soon as I can get my head around how to teach and share music virtually, which is taking up a lot of my time right now, like all of us.
I understand. Yes,
but I really plan. I do hope to plan to do some composing.
Well, we would be excited to see what you come up with next. The piece that we have shared so far was just very enthusiastically received by both audiences in Boulder and of course in DC. And I know you've performed at many other places as well. I've done it with you in, let's see, we've done it in Florida, in Jacksonville. We did it up in Rochester. We've done it in Louisiana. So you know, we've taken that one around, and so maybe it's time for the mandolin and fiddle concerto to make its rounds as well.
Here, please, let's do that.
Indeed. Well, I'm just delighted to see you, even virtually, and really appreciate your taking the time to speak with us today, speak with me and our viewers. I hope that everyone will then have a chance to watch the video from the Kennedy Center that will be accompanying this this interview, and check it out. So I think I'll draw this interview to a close by saying thank you so much, Jeff, and thank you all for watching.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you.
Pleasure.